He's coming on the show tonight to talk movies that gave us screams, chills, and frights. He's a horror movie buff, didn't you know? Talking scary films with his friend Donny Cho. Cause he's the Dr. Dean, the Dean of Horror. Cause he's the Dr. Dean, the Dean of Horror. Talking movies of all that fear and wonder. Can tell by that accent, he's from down under. From the land of koalas and kangaroos. All the horror film knowledge that you can use. So sit back, buckle up folks, and don't be tardy. Good I might throw another shrimp on that Barbie. Cause he's the Dr. Dean, the Dean of Horror. Cause he's the Dr. Dean, the Dean of Horror. Will Jason McLean join us? Who knows? Maybe last night a freaking dingo ate my baby. Cause he's the Doctor, the Dean of Scary Flicks. Will Jason crash the show? Yes, cause he's a dick. Dr. Dean talking all those movies we fear. Cause Foster's is Australian for beer. Cause he's a Dr. Dean talking all those movies we fear. Cause Foster's is Australian for beer.
I don't know how I'm going to live up to that, Donny. Fantastic.
What'd you guys think? What'd you think, Dr. Dean?
It's the greatest thing I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of things. That's great.
This may be his best one, honestly.
I put a lot of love into that one.
Man, I love it. Good job.
My favorite one is the one where you're drinking beer with Paul Hogan and Steve Irwin, but almost close is the shrimp on the Barbie bit. That was
throw another shrimp on the Barbie.
Yeah,
I was proud of that one.
I never met Paul Hogan, but when I used to write for The Spectator in Australia, I had a column, and I also would write articles as a regular contributor as well as a columnist. And I had I think it was the cover story, and they had, they'd have caricature artists do great artwork on the cover. And I think this one was a cover story, if I recall. But Hogan had been, I think, stopped by immigration in Australia. I don't think they were letting him leave the country to go back to America until he paid some ridiculously large tax bill. And I wrote a piece saying about how when I was a young man and I traveled the world, Hogan had been the most awesome ambassador possible for me. And everywhere I would go, people would make Paul Hogan jokes and they'd buy me drinks, they'd buy me beers. And I'm like, the federal government should be cutting Paul Hogan a check for millions of dollars for essentially the free ambassadorial and tourist work he's done for Australia. Now, he was employed in some tourist ads by the Australian government as well, in fairness. You probably saw them throw another shrimp on the Barbie. But just the goodwill that man created for a young, Australian abroad back in the day, I was forever grateful. And apparently he and his people read the piece and they contacted the editor and said, we're very happy with that piece. So that was my contact with Hogan through an editor and through his manager.
Well, there you go.
Nice.
That's
Paul Hogan left you a positive comment.
Exactly.
Yeah. That your biggest brush with fame before meeting me.
It's true.
So that's what I heard.
So I guess Robert Downey Jr. was right. He is indeed a national treasure.
He is.
Yeah.
Jason McLean or Paul Hogan, both are, I guess.
Both. Let's be honest.
That was a Tropic Thunder reference. Remember? He was like, pump the brakes.
Oh, we know.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. We all got it.
Anyhow, so welcome to the show, everybody, to another fine edition of Donny Cho Says Stuff, hosted by myself, yours truly, Donny Cho. And tonight I have two fine gentlemen with me. My partner in crime, Jason McLean, and his other partner in crime, or former, or sometimes, Dr. Dean Bertram, who you may see on Untold Radio sometimes together. So
I miss the old mysterious library days.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was some fun watching. I'd like
before Jason and I had our divorce, our professional divorce.
Yeah, this is awkward. You know, my ex, my current. You know, it's actually technically you're both my exes now that I think about it.
Gosh.
Yeah, this is. Well, screw that. I just realized what's going on here. I'm out.
Speaking. Oh yeah. Oh, he's doing that trick again.
Yes, I am.
That. All right. Anyway, speaking of, all right, the way I'll introduce the topic. Well, speaking of partners in crime, a couple years back, Jason on his show, when he was doing a show, he had myself and Dr. Dean and Bigfoot Michigan Rob, the four of us, we were on. And I don't know if we're talking about some UFOs or some shit. I don't remember. But afterwards, Jason had to leave, and then it was just me and Dr. Dean and Rob backstage. We wound up talking for like 2 hours that night.
I remember.
Yeah.
Good chat.
That was like way more interesting than the podcast itself, actually, because I remember that conversation way more.
That's often the way after a podcast when you keep talking to the guest. You're like, why wasn't this the show? We should have started like a minute ago, not an hour a minute ago, and we just shouldn't be talking now.
That's usually
it does seem like the podcasts are actually like the warm-ups for the real conversation.
Yeah. So I remember thinking that night afterwards, I was like, man, this should be a podcast. So I figured, hey, you know what? Let's do that podcast. So one of the topics we talked about that night was an interesting little tidbit I found out about you, Dean, was that not only are you a big-time horror fan, dare I say a horror nerd, but you even started or run your own horror festival.
Yeah,
so
that's correct.
Where should we start? Okay, before we go into me asking you about the horror festival, just walk us through, like, you were talking about how you as a kid would be all up about like Fangoria magazine and being really into horror. My first question for you, Dean, is what was the movie that you saw as a kid that turned you into a horror fan?
I remember it so clearly. It was John Carpenter's Halloween, which is still one of the greatest, I think, horror gateway drug films ever, particularly when you see it when you're a kid. I was on holiday or on vacation, as you'd say in America, with my parents in Fiji, and we were in this lovely kind of small island resort, this little island which had this very small resort on it, and all the parents at night would get drunk up in this gorgeous bar in the kind of the mountain, which was surrounded by jungle. It was a beautiful resort, and the kids would be entertained by an event coordinator, and they'd put movies on, and this is, way back in the day, so nobody really cared. And one of the movies, totally inappropriately, I guess, for a bunch of little kids, because there were kids smaller than me, I don't know what age I was, maybe 9 or something, was Halloween. And I remember watching that movie and being riveted. And then I think when the adult partying continued into the night, I was back in the villa we were staying in there by myself. Maybe my little brother was sleeping in the other room. And when you go to island to tropical or island kind of vacations, they often have like wooden bamboo swords as tourist things. People used to bring it back in the 70s and 80s and hang them on their wall.
I know what you're talking about.
Anyway, we had one of there we bought when we toured a local village or something, and I remember laying in bed clutching that wooden native sword, terrified that Michael Myers was about to burst into my room. And from then onwards, this was probably the beginning of the home rental video market as well. And these were the days where a video library was a literal library. Like, my parents subscribed to the library, probably paid, I don't know what it would have been then, $100 a year. And you could go every day. This is before Blockbuster. There were lots of little independent ones. And you could go every day.
The mom and pop video rental stores. Yeah.
And you would just you would just go and you would just check it out like you would check out a book, because you'd already paid for your library subscription at the beginning of the year. So my brother and I would go and we would just rent from what in the UK is called the video nasty sections, so where Evil Dead was, and where Dawn of the Dead was, and where Phantasm, and all of these type of movies, Friday the 13th, all the obvious ones. And I remember one day there was a new employee at that video store, and my brother and I went up with, I don't know, whatever we had, Demon Seed or something ridiculous. And we went up to rent this movie, and the other guy, like the guy who knew us was there, and there was another guy there who's going, "Oh, we've got some new Disney movies in that you kids might enjoy." And the other guy was like, "Come on, all these guys watch us like Evil Dead and Nightmare on Elm Street. They don't want any of the Disney stuff." And that's still true to this day, probably in some ways. But yeah, so that was my entry into horror. First Halloween, then access to that video store.
Wow, Halloween, the very first one. Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah, that's a solid film to start off on.
That's a lot of people's like all time. I noticed like people who are like horror fans from that generation. A lot of them will point to Halloween as being like their, I don't know.
There's sort of gateway drug into horror.
Yeah.
It still plays really well. That score, I think, is an incredible score as well. Like, it's certainly, I see the Jaws image at the top of the screen here, but I think other than Jaws, the Halloween score might be the greatest, memorable. I can't speak the language of musicians, but whatever, that very memorable kind of riff of music or whatever it is that just continues the same way the Jaws dun 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 dun, everybody instantly thinks of. The Halloween one's very memorable as well. That tune gets stuck in your head, and it's been continued through, I think, the entire franchise and then the movies that have come afterwards. So that was probably, I think that's part of its initial potency. And John Carpenter as well was an absolute master of his game. And that has some very early, we tend to think of slasher movies as being, just kind of, silly shock entertainment. But some of the cinematography work in those early Carpenter movies, like I think he had a proto Steadicam. I don't know if the Steadicam was readily available then, but there's all these kind of weird, tracking shots with Michael Myers, which was some pre-Steadicam kind of device, and the way Carpenter, frames very classically, and just his ability to show, empty streets of Haddonfield being, and with that score playing, indicating this incredible menace. It's really pretty clever. Like a lot of that stuff we're so used to now, but it was pretty groundbreaking at the time. I certainly didn't know it was groundbreaking as a kid, but it certainly got into my psyche and changed my taste in pop culture and cinema and the like forever, or at least directed it, forever.
So how would you say, like, as you got older, your taste in horror movie like evolved? Like, did you, I don't know, explore like more like some of the older ones, or like go watch the Hammer House ones or the classic Universal monsters? Or
I love all of that stuff. I love Hammer. Hammer's so fantastic. I love Universal. Those older films have their own type of atmosphere, which is, it's often, whether it's a genuine period piece like, Dracula from Universal, or whether it's a piece which just becomes a period piece because it's, like Creature from the Black Lagoon in the 50s or whenever it is, all feels like period pieces when you're watching it as a kid in the 80s. Right. And Hammer obviously is all primarily period pieces as well. So it evokes, that fairy tale element as well, which I think is wonderful. I mean, I liked all kinds of horror, but probably what, to be honest, happened to me post Halloween is because of that movie. When you hadn't, it wouldn't be shocking to anybody now who'd watched any horror, but at the time, as a little kid who hadn't seen any horror, it was super shocking. So I think it was that desire to chase that thrill ride of seeing films which were increasingly shocking. So my trajectory is into the video nasties at the video store. It was always looking at the exploitation covers and looking for something that looked like it was going to serve up even more terror and gore than Halloween. So if you look at all the posters like Phantasm, can you remember the old, it was called Never Dead in Australia. It was called Phantasm. And the video nasty cover, I think, had a woman covering maybe her face with her hands, but they were kind of like maybe even see-through or something, and the ball drilling into a head or something, and there were all these kind of, I think the Incubus cover might have had a spider dropping into a woman's mouth. I think there was Dead and Buried, which had kind of the face of, a woman's head, in the foreground, just the rest of her body buried. Motel Hell had, like somebody in a piggy chainsaw with this piggy mask with a chainsaw, and people, it was anyway. You were always looking at the covers, and that's why it's real exploitation, because they're exploiting elements, they're exploiting artwork to make you go in that direction, and that probably continued for much of my. not so much anymore, but certainly then. And then when you read Fangoria, and there was another magazine I think called Gore Zone, and they always highlighted special effects work. And then you get into people like the effects artist yourself when you're a hardcore fan. So Tom Savini, who's a legendary effects artist, or there's a number of people who are creature effects artists who were a big deal as well. But then we'd start watching documentaries about how Tom Savini would do these effects. So you'd start to watch horror movies and almost appreciate the artistry of the kill, like in Dawn of the Dead, when the guy's top of his head gets, chopped off by the helicopter blades, or in any Friday the 13th movie where there's always an increase in the weirdness of the kills. I think it appeals to that type of, young fan who is just there appreciating the ridiculousness and the over the top nature of the gore and the violence. And I definitely fell into that back then when I was in my teens, for sure.
Makes sense. So you're going through this, you're addicted. Again, I love how you point out like the cover art, because I think there's again, as a comic fan, which you are as well, I think there's that connection to the cover selling you on that story. There's that connection. I did the same thing. We all kind of got into special effects on the back end because you want to see how that plays out. But so you're a teenager, you've discovered this. What leads you to start the film festival?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd always made in fact, I was only talking to my girlfriend about this today because she came over.
Real quick, we've got another Aussie in the chat.
Yeah,
Jojo. She's also from Australia. By the way, before I let you go again, I actually bought a Foster's.
There you go.
To drink for tonight's show. This will be the first time in my entire motherfucking life that I ever taste a Foster's. And the local liquor store near me, they didn't sell any other cans. They only sell like these big ones. I can buy any like 6-pack or anything. So
it might be your last one. It's not the greatest beer in the world. It's actually it's essentially just an export now. Like it's pretty rare to find.
Yeah, it says.
So, I just saw Jojo say it wasn't great beer as well.
It's founded in Australia, brewed into USA. So
yeah.
It's pushed. I think it's just pushed as a tourist beer. I can't even remember. I mean, you can get it in Australia, but it's not. It's very rarely at your local bar. I'm sure you can go into a bottle store or a liquor store and get it.
Let's try it. Donny Cho's first time drinking Foster's.
Let's see what you think.
Not the best beer. This is not the best beer.
It's like Lone Star beer here in Texas, it's a gag beer. And some people it's just because there's a Lone Star on. It's like, well, we got to have it. No, it's trash.
I don't feel more Australian right now.
It's a national beer of Texas.
Yeah,
it's almost unpatriotic to say something bad about Lone Star.
Well, I've been here long enough. My family's I'm 5th generation. They can kiss my butt. Anyway.
So going through how you got started getting into like horror film festivals.
That's right. Well, I've made crappy little movies since I was, even before I was into horror movies. Interestingly, I think we used to play around, my brother and I, with our old man Super 8 film camera, and then one Christmas we both got matching Super 8 film cameras and this little projector each. It was kind of this package you would get, which the projector was like a TV though, so it didn't project onto a wall. The film still ran, but you would watch it on a screen. And they were super simple cameras. I don't even think they had a focus on them. They must have had a super wide lens or something. They were literally point and shoot film cameras, obviously designed for kids. So we would always make films, often films, replicating action movies or, like a Raiders of the Lost Ark type movie. But anyway, I kept making films, crappy little films, through most of my life. And I was only telling my girlfriend the story today because she had to suffer for about the 5th or 6th time the cut of the current sequence I'm working on for the man who invented flying saucers. And every time she comes over and I fiddled with it a little bit more or added something, I'm like, oh, can you watch it and give me your feedback? And I'm sure she's super sweet about it, but I'm sure it can't be enjoyable to watch this thing again and again and again. Anyway, so I was a filmmaker. I'm not saying I was a great filmmaker, but I was certainly a filmmaker. And we'd made a short film, my brother, my girlfriend at the time, and myself, called Foresta Rossa, which was kind of, I guess, I don't know, the title was and perhaps the style was a reference to Italian horror cinema. Not so much, it wasn't, maybe more Mario Bava than perhaps Dario Argento, like early Bava. It was kind of like a dark fairy tale, just a short film. And we made this film, and it played in some festivals around the world. And we were very conscious that there wasn't a film festival in Australia that it was appropriate for. There was no, before I founded a Night of Horror International Film Festival, I'll go into the details a little bit of that if you want. Before I founded that, then short film festival in Sydney, and on the time I did this, like I think it only run 1 or 2 or 3 years. It hadn't been around for long. And I'm like, where are we going to submit this film to? There's nowhere that's going to screen it. Because back then, particularly, Australia was known to be very unfriendly to genre films, period, let alone horror genre films. And so we thought there's got to be another, 12 to 16 people in Sydney who've also little horror filmmakers like us who want to play their film at a festival. And we probably modeled the idea of a Night of Horror on, there's a big film festival in Sydney called Trop Fest, or there used to be, and they'd play about 12 films every year in a park. It was a massive event. It was one of the big social calendar events. So we probably thought we'll do about the same thing. One night, we'll call it a Night of Horror, and we'll play, we'll get maybe 20 people submit films, we'll play, a dozen of them or something, and that'll be it. But even that first year, we got, 180 films submitted from all around the world, just short films. And then we went, we can't just do one night. That's really disingenuous. So we ended up doing 3 days the first year anyway. But it was primarily originally just because we wanted somewhere to screen our film. And we thought, and we weren't part of any horror community then. We became one. Well, I guess we almost became the horror community in Sydney, or a big part of it. But that's why, we just wanted to screen our own film. We thought there'd be other people like us.
So it's called A Night of Horror. That's the running.
Yeah, it's called a Night of Horror International Film Festival. In its first year, it was actually called a Night of Horror Short Film Festival. And by the second year, we'd opened up to features, and it got longer and longer and longer. Now it runs for 4 days in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, back to back with the other fest I run here, Midwest Weird Fest. I moved it from Australia. It had run there for, 12, 13, 14, 15 years. It's almost, I think this year is its 19th. Or rather, 2026 is its 19th, and then it will be in its 20th. So we've been going for a while.
Wow, that's a good long run, man. That's
what's it like running a film festival for like 19 years like that? Like every year you got the event, you're planning. It's almost like planning a conference, organizing, I guess, different filmmaker submissions and the venues and everything. Like, walk us through that. Like, what's it like to do that for so long, and just every year you got this big event coming up that's hanging over your head, that you're prepping for and stuff.
Well, in Sydney, funnily enough, I'll answer your question. I'll answer it in a roundabout way. That way, after I started A Night of Horror, we started to have a lot of people ask us who made science fiction films, why don't you take science fiction films? Why don't you take fantasy films? So we started another festival when we were running A Night of Horror for 2 years. We started another festival, which I don't run anymore, but even that ran for several years, called Fantastic Planet Sydney Sci-Fi and Fantasy Film Festival, and we ran them 6 months apart. So my whole life was like, this kind of, infinity loop. It was just get ready for one festival. The festival's running, get ready for the next festival. And my whole life was just running festivals. So eventually we brought those 2 festivals together and ran them at the same time. So it wasn't just festivaling my whole life. So to answer your question, it's probably about, towards the end, 3 or 4 months of really crazy work, and probably, 6 months of moderate work. We open for submissions. It's just an open call for submissions. We use a platform called Film Freeway, which is the world's leading platform, and people submit their film there. And then we watch the films, and we get, several hundred submissions. And then it's just a matter of whittling those down to not just necessarily the best films, although certainly that as well, but films that make sense as a program. You know what I mean? Like, you can't have, and I'm exaggerating, but you can't have, if you're playing, 20 feature films, you can't have 20 zombie movies. You want to have, a selection of different kind of films. Or some night you might want to have 3 zombie movies because you don't want to do a zombie night. You might have 3 zombie movies you really like, and you go, okay, we're going to do a zombie special on the Saturday night or something. So it's about curating as well. And there's short film programs as well. So it's about, there's I don't want to say art because that sounds pretentious really, but there is something artistic about curating, just like there is in creating. Like you're trying to put a program together that makes sense as a whole and is going to be enjoyed by the audience, either as a whole or there's things for different people that they'll enjoy. So that takes a considerable amount of time. And then of course there's that's the fun stuff though. Watching the films and building the program and curating, it's fun. Then of course there's everything else, there's the promotion, and as you guys know, with Crossing Realms conference coming up, there's coordinating guests and advertising and press releasing and dealing with the venues and arranging the after parties, and so there's all of that kind of stuff as well. So a lot, I mean, it's 90% administration probably 10% creative, to be honest.
Yeah.
So all of those submissions, you've watched them all yourself?
Well, in Sydney, I used to have other programmers. So some years I would fob off all of the short films and I have a programming team for the short films. It changed. I mean, throughout the course of the festival, at first, myself and my girlfriend at the time would do most of the programming. And then we tried to be democratic and we'd bring other people in and do programming panels and we'd all fill in forms. It's just such a waste of time. Plus, it's like any type of art. I mean, something like cinema might be different because you can kind of collaborate. Somebody has to do the production design. Somebody has to do the sound recording. But I don't think you get a really strong curatorial sense when you build a festival if you've got 20 different programmers. I just don't. And I learned that over the years. And I don't want to say anything mean about anybody, but sometimes I would have short film programmers and I wouldn't be happy with the shorts programming at all. I'd be like, this is a junk program. You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't like it. I didn't like the way it was put together. So by the time I start running festivals in America, because I run 2 here, I also run Midwest Weird Fest, which is coming into its 10th year actually next year. 2026 is Midwest Weird Fest 10th year. Anyway, regardless of how long they've been running, I think I got to a point where I wanted to have that kind of curatorial vision over the whole festival. So now I watch everything. I watch the features, I watch the shorts, and I program both of those festivals by myself, which is almost unheard of at the size these two festivals are, because they're both fairly well respected, fairly well ranked, very well ranked actually, festivals in the genre space. But a part of that is probably because I do, you know what I mean? There's a lot of festivals that don't play a lot of cold submissions from filmmakers. There's a lot of festivals which probably doesn't have that one eye that's making sure there's, a sense to the whole broader program, not just a sense to this one little bracket of short films and this other bracket. Like I kind of take, I don't want to be proud of anything, but I do take some pride in putting that festival and both of the festivals together and having and making those decisions, because I think the festivals are always a heck of a good time, and I think the cinema there is really pretty special. Like the program is pretty special for each of those festivals now.
Yeah, no, I think you should be proud of them. I mean, they're, like you said, they are very well respected, right? Okay, let me do this since you don't do a very good job of self-promotion, and I understand because I don't either. Midwest Weird Fest and A Night of Horror International are very well respected. They are amazing festivals, and I would suggest that a key component of that is curatorial vision, as you call it, because it is a form of art. You do have to put those things together, and that is a tribute to you. And again, when you finish up The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers, I think that'll be no less brilliant when you're done.
Thanks, man.
You have a very distinct aesthetic, and you have an excellent artistic vision, and I think you bring it, and you bring it to these festivals, and people recognize that, and you should not sell yourself short on that. And everyone in the chat, if you have an opportunity to go to those festivals, you should, because they're awesome.
Well, thanks, man. I'd love to see people there.
Moving on to, I think, what would be the meat and potatoes of this, would be, and I know this is where Donnie wants to go. What's your favorite? Either because horror is not just a singular genre; it has its own subgenres, and there's monster horror, there's slasher, psychological thriller. What's your favorite horror film? Just to start off, I think that's a good solid place to start.
Well, I was going to say, what is your Mount Rushmore?
Oh, that's that's
Yeah.
even better. There you
What's
go.
your Mount Rushmore of horror films?
I think Halloween would still be in that Mount Rushmore. For not only the impact it had on me, but still the watchability of that movie. Like I can still watch Halloween regularly and still enjoy it. I think on my Mount Rushmore, this mightn't be on a lot of people's, but it would be on mine because this is a movie I watched early on as well, and I like the strange style. I like the buddy elements. I like the gung ho shooting elements, and that is the Phantasm series. The Phantasm series would be, and that probably answers some of Jason's question as well, because I've gone through different periods in my horror fandom where I've appreciated different kind of horror, but I think it's always stayed consistent that I've enjoyed that kind of buddy gung ho type horror, and Phantasm's a great example of that, where there's it's as much about the relationship between the male characters as it is about the existential crisis that they're facing for the planet. So that would be up there. I think also Romero's Dead trilogy would be up there as well. It's always difficult to say, it always used to change what my favorite. And there's movies after the first three, and Land of the Dead's a lot of fun as well. I really like the fourth movie, Land of the Dead. Diary of the Dead is, take it or leave it. And there's one other. What's the other one? Anyway, the first three, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead, I think they're just spectacular. And of course, without those movies, the whole way we look at zombie cinema today, or Walking Dead, or any of that's all just Romero's stuff, now
Right.
with hundreds of millions of dollars to make a hit TV series. Of course,
Right.
Greg Nicotero, who is one of, I think, the showrunners or one of the directors on that show, certainly one of the heavy hitters. His background was he was Tom Savini's makeup assistant on Day of the Dead. So he was a friend of Romero's, and he's clearly carried that Romero vision through there. So I think anybody with a love of zombie movies would have to acknowledge that. And I'm also, to try to put one on there, I'm also a big fan of Italian horror cinema. So maybe Lucio Fulci's The Beyond is probably my favorite of Italian horror movie. That would probably be on there. There was a period where I was into body horror, like in a big way, just because I think it was the only thing that scared me anymore. I think I'd been so, zombie movies
Desensitized. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think things like Takashi Miike's Audition would have been on that Mount Rushmore for sure if you'd asked me 10 years ago. That's an amazing movie. And another one that I know we're probably passing the number of presidents' heads now, but another film I personally like, and it's a film that I played. I did the Australian premiere of it back in, I think, when was it on the festival circuit? 2010, is a film called The Revenant, which is made by a good friend of mine now. He wasn't a friend of mine then. He came to the festival when I was running in Australia. He's an American, Kerry Pryor. And The Revenant is another one of those films which is primarily about the buddy relationship between two men. And it crosses the kind of, it's a vampire movie, but it's also like a vigilante movie. And it's also, a buddy film, and it's hilarious. And so that's probably up there as well. I'm sure if I thought about it, I could throw out some other movies that, made a big impact on me, but that'd probably be the Rushmore.
I want to ask you about a particular movie, because this movie came out a while back and it kind of really changed the whole horror genre, flipped it on its head. Blair Witch Project. Because I remember, I believe I was in college when this movie came out, and it was really the first one where it was really marketed as real, quote unquote. Like when it first came out and was first marketed, people thought they were legitimately seeing found footage. And it really changed the genre because, as you're probably familiar, having run all these film festivals, this is when all the found footage stuff started getting huge and very commonplace. I'm sure Blair Witch, they weren't the first to do it, but after Blair Witch, it was like every other horror movie was found footage. Yeah. And yeah, I just want to hear your thoughts. Like, what did you think about Blair Witch when it came out? Thoughts on the movie overall, how it affected the genre?
I mean, it made an incredible impact on the genre. I was actually in the US when that movie was released, funnily enough. I think I was doing a PhD research trip here. And I remember on television there was a documentary about the Blair Witch, which was part of the marketing, of it. And the documentary said that the Blair Witch story was true. It was genius marketing, because it's not like most in the olden days. I remember they used to quite regularly, like if Raiders of the Lost Ark came out when I was a kid, they'd have, a documentary about how the stunts were done, or, this was very standard. But the Blair Witch documentary was actually saying something happened to these 3 kids, this. So the documentary I watched on television, I saw before I saw the actual movie. And then I bought the film and took it back to show my friends in Australia, because I think it was already out. It hadn't been, I don't think it was even in cinemas yet, but it was out here. You could get it on VHS, if I recall. Yeah. The Blair Witch is often criticized, but I think it's still a watchable movie. I mean, we're so spoilt with found footage now. I'm a fan of the found footage genre. A lot of people give it heat. We actually introduced this year at the festival Best Found Footage Award, because I think it deserves to be recognized. And I played so many wonderful found footage films over the year. One off the top of my head that I really enjoyed, and I think it won Best Director when we played it back in Sydney, which I think was in like 2017 or something, was a film called Be My Cat, a film for Anne by Adrian Sophie. Have either of you guys seen that film?
No, I have not.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, it's by a Romanian director. And the conceit of the movie, without giving too much away, is there's the director who's also the lead actor. He's a very talented actor, Adrian. He's obsessed with Anne Hathaway, and he wants to make this film to get Anne Hathaway's attention, and it spirals into all kinds of crazy places. But the film that's really picked up, a massive cult following now. Like when you see the top, 10 or top 20, whatever they kind of lists for found footage, Be My Cat is often on there. So that's a great film.
I love that you've created a found footage genre, because it is a great genre, but it's a genre that works really well for horror films, right? Because it puts you in that perspective. And I know a lot of people, like you said, a lot of people give the Blair Witch Project a lot of heat, but there are some elements that are really brilliant. It was very brilliantly done on the cheap. And really, for my money, outside of the Blair Witch Project, there's only 2 other, and I still think they fall into the horror genre of found footage that really work, and that's Cloverfield, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the best ones ever made. And then Donnie and I were talking about this before, Bobcat Goldthwait's Willow Creek.
Yeah, that's a good film too.
Yeah. And for my money, it's not just a great found footage horror film. It is probably, again, this is just me, it is the best Bigfoot film ever made, because of what it brings to the story. There's a lot of elements that you kind of have to be in the field to really appreciate what he's done with it.
Well, it's interesting you should say that's the best Bigfoot movie ever made, because I disagree with you, as you probably know what mine is. But interestingly, the film I love the most is similar, not so much in realization, but because it also intentionally pushes into that cinema verite type space, and that's Legend of Boggy Creek, which isn't a found footage film. It's before Blair Witch, but I think I might have read an interview somewhere, it might have even been a Lyle Blackburn book by one of the creators of Blair Witch, who then went on to do is it Exists, or what's that Bigfoot?
I think it Exists, yeah.
Found footage movie. I think they mentioned that the Legend of Boggy Creek may have been an influence, because it feels like you're watching. Boggy Creek isn't found footage, but it still has that feel of you're watching, something which is, partly true. And it's because they're casting sometimes the real experiences as the actors, and they're reenacting, everything. Another early film which is found footage, which would have maybe once, if you'd asked me 20 years ago, my Mount Rushmore, this might have been on it, because it's such a spectacular movie, although it's difficult recommending it because it's not for the squeamish, and it's certainly politically incorrect to say it's such a great movie, but it is. It's Cannibal Holocaust.
I was about to bring that one up.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Understood. Yeah, that'll do it.
I remember I was once invited on a radio program in Sydney, Radio National, which would be the same as NPR here, I guess. And they had a film show called Trash or Treasure, where you could suggest a movie that, was outside of the realms of, what people normally consider the great movies. And they said, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I want to do Cannibal Holocaust. So of course, I'm on Radio National. I'm on NPR talking about Cannibal Holocaust for an hour, which was great.
That's hilarious. Okay, so would you suggest, because I mean, obviously you have a broader taste of horror. It sounds like probably to a degree, maybe not slasher. What would you say is your favorite subtype of horror? Because it does sound like you're
subgenre.
Yeah, subgenre.
Yeah.
It feels like probably slashers.
Because there's a good number of them if you think about it.
Oh, there really is.
Yes, I mean, it's not that I dislike slasher movies. Clearly, Halloween's such a one of my favorite movies, but I don't think. Of course, another slasher-esque movie, which once again might have been on my Rushmore, is Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I was about to mention that.
Crosses
That was like
into
my
that
personal
verite
favorite
area as well, right?
Yeah,
I like Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah,
As a slasher flick, I thought it was up there.
I think the thing is the early slasher, again, your Halloweens, your Texas Chainsaw Massacres. I think some of those, the original Friday the 13th, right? They are clearly in that genre, but they're also not. The slasher genre becomes so over the top so quickly. It's almost like they are like it's its own, like those first runs are sort of their own subgenre, where they did have, okay, maybe not Friday the 13th, but they still had more. They had to rely more on plot. There was a bigger psychological thrill aspect to them than maybe what you get with, the later versions.
Yeah,
even the first Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, there was a terrible period in the 90s, I think, which tried to, and the 90s has some good horror movies, but it also has some just horrible horror movies. And remember, there was this trend for a while with all these, and Scream kind of kicked it off, which a lot of people really love. I can take or leave Scream. I know I get the self-referential postmodern aspects of everything else, but I've never been a massive fan of the Scream franchise, but it kind of kicked off this kind of, again, this postmodern look at the slasher horror, where it was often one of the kids themselves, which was the killer, which had already been done in 70s and 80s slasher movies anyway. But it kind of became this thing, and there was like, I Know What You Did Last Summer, which I know this is an adult show, so I can say this. I used to always joke about it and say the title of that should be I Know What Jennifer Lawrence's Tits Did Last Summer, because all of the poster artwork was her in this skimpy white, singlet. But there was a run of those. There was like Valentine, and they were just, to me, they were unwatchable. As somebody who considered himself a fairly serious horror fan, going to the cinema to see all of those tentpole horror movies in the 90s was just a terrible experience. They were all just awful. And then towards the end of the 90s, I think we started getting, we were mentioning before, maybe that was even by the 2000s, like the Dawn of the Dead remake. And, you started to get good horror on the big screen again. Another film, which, I mean, I'm not a massive Eli Roth fan always, but I think Hostel was, it was a popcorn masterpiece anyway. Like, I saw Hostel in the cinema, I hadn't been spoiled at all. I had no spoilers. I had no idea what I was seeing, except I was going in to see a horror movie. And Hostel really kicked me in the gonads. Like, I was like, I wasn't expecting to see it. Again, this is after probably all this junk in the 90s.
Right.
You weren't expecting it to be that good.
No, yeah, it was fantastic. So Roth's done some great stuff. Like, Roth often takes a lot. I think Cabin Fever is a nothing movie, like his first kind of venture into horror. I don't think Cabin Fever is great, but I think Hostel, the first one, is just spectacular, because it's like, I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen it. They should see it if they want to see a fairly, gruesome horror movie. But it kind of, it's got all this body horror, terrible stuff, and then it kind of spins into the last act, almost into something which feels like a higher stakes, 1970s spy thriller, where he's trying to get away, and he's got to get the train, and there's all these references to Takashi Miike in there as well. It's just so good. I mean, Hostel is, I haven't watched it for a while, but even thinking about it now, I remember how excited I love that. I love when I stumble on something I'm not expecting, and I'm like, this is amazing. Hostel was one of those films for me.
Interesting. I was going to ask a question, but I think Donnie had a question for you about a particular genre that I think would be better suited for this section before the question.
Well, I wanted to know what about like your thoughts on, like, you mentioned Audition, but something like The Ring, or like Japanese or Korean or just Asian horror, how it's different, how from like Western horror, and like from what you've seen, and your thoughts on like that dichotomy there.
Oh,
You're muted. Muted.
I was saying I do love it. I love The Ring and The Grudge, or what the Ju-on, or whatever the
Yeah.
original language title is. It captures, and that's I think the same thing I like about, like I was mentioning other Japanese cinema, I like Japanese horror cinema like Takashi Miike. It captures why sometimes those things I think are so effective. The same way I think Italian cinema is so effective, and horror movies from other countries which aren't Western speaking, not English speaking anyway, and so it can even be in Europe. I think the Italian cinema is very different to the English language horror cinema of the time, but there are different cultural tropes which are explored, which are particularly frightening or relevant perhaps to that country, but they're still super weird and frightening regardless. So the whole, like, women with long black hair, do you know what I mean, is clearly a thing in Japanese.
Oh, that's Asian cultures, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And
Korea and China too.
Yeah. And I think so, to see things which are presented as, and they still come off as spooky, whether it's part of, your personal folklore or not, but I love those clearly folkloric elements of those movies. And again, I think those films, and we were talking about how bad some 90s horror cinema was. I think a lot of the great 90s horror cinema from that period was stuff that was coming out of Asia, as opposed to stuff that was, the popcorn movies being churned out here. And there have been great popcorn horror movies. Do you know what I mean? Many great.
Yeah.
I think The First Nightmare on Elm Street's a classic example. And I think that movie was genuinely, fairly original and fairly shocking, and kind of grabs you, by the throat a little bit when it came out. And we could go through, so much horror is mainstreamish, but there was a period, I think, where it was pretty sad, but the rest of the world, particularly Asia, really held its own in that period.
Going back to that concept of the tropes, the cultural tropes that are different from ours, one of the things, I forget who said it, I was watching something and they mentioned that one of the reasons that Asian horror is so terrifying, particularly when you're dealing with like yokai, right, that are so disturbing to the Western audiences. Western audience monsters have rules, right, that we're familiar with, whereas a lot of the Asian ghosts, they don't have the same set of rules. So like they can just pop up anywhere at any time. There's none of this. They can't come out at daylight, or they can't come in unless they're invited, or whatever, right?
Right.
Like Western monsters have rules, whereas in the Asian films specifically, they really don't, or at least the rules are so dramatically different that we don't necessarily recognize them in the same way. And I think that brings, again, it's that unfamiliarity with them, where it's like, oh, these things are breaking our rules. There's that added terror of, oh, the things that the protagonist could potentially do aren't there. And that brings an added element to a Western audience, I think.
Yeah, it's probably one of the reasons those movies, were so spooky.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of curious, why, because you were big into Halloween, so you started off with the slasher subgenre. So let's take all these iconic slasher villains, right? Like Leatherface, Jason, Freddy.
Donnie
What, in your opinion, makes Mike Myers stand out amongst that group?
And I incidentally, I like some of the others, like Leatherface. I went as Leatherface to Halloween once with a functioning chainsaw without the blade, which was an awful lot of fun, in a full leather face costume, starting a chainsaw, making people scream. So I've always been a big Leatherface fan. Leatherface in some ways is scary because he'll eat you, which is perhaps more terrifying, or tear off your skin or anything. But I think Michael Myers, and obviously the mythology becomes convoluted as we go on, but it was even there in the beginning. There's something supernatural about Michael Myers, and not supernatural in a silly way like Jason maybe, or like Freddy, but
like Jason being invincible.
He's literally the boogeyman. Remember, like the speech at the end where Jamie Lee Curtis says to Donald Pleasance's character, you know, what's the boogeyman? And he says, as a matter of fact, he was, or whatever the line is. And then you see this reveal that Pleasance has just emptied his revolver into him and he's fallen off the second story of the house and he's not there. You know, there's just an imprint of his body in the lawn, right? And there's a realization with the Myers character is everything that this crazy psychotic, almost or obsessed at least, paranoid psychiatrist has been warning throughout the movie, that he's, you know, he's looked into his eyes and there's nothing there, or, you know what I mean? All these things he's been saying, he's evil, he's, you know, pure unadulterated, he's not human. And it seems like, you know, come on, he's just, you know, he's a whack job. But I think you realize that Myers represents, he's a personification of evil. He's the personification of the boogeyman. And now we've seen, I mean, again, we're so oversaturated with horror movies. You just have to go on Tubi or Amazon or anywhere, and there's more than you could ever conceivably watch. But back then, sure, there were horror movies being produced, but it was nothing like today. So there was something about that movie presenting what just seems like, you know, a slasher serial killer guy, but he's actually not. He's actually something far more evil and far more obsessed and far more driven, and you can't stop him. You know, he's unstoppable.
Right. I think it's a great point. That it is the slasher subgenre, and like you said, the psycho killer concept is there, but then there's that extra little, you know, there is a supernatural element that doesn't really get revealed until the end, but it's there in the subtext. And I think also the mask, right? Because it is a William Shatner mask, that they made. But there is something just haunting about this. The face is just wrong, right? Like, you know, we were by that point, you'd seen the idea of a hood as a mask 100 times, right? Even in westerns, right? The idea of, you know, with the eyes cut off. But this is just like a Halloween mask, literally. But there's just like there's something wrong with the face, and it adds to that otherness factor to the film.
Absolutely, the expressionlessness of that, you know, white spray painted Bill Shatner mask from Don Post. It's terrifying, and he doesn't have to move. And now it's a trope, right? But he doesn't have to move fast. He just does his own thing. You know, he's going to get you. You know what I mean? Like, he just is relentless and you see it. We talk about wrestling sometimes, Donnie, but you see the Michael Myers tropes, you know, cross over into other popular culture, like the Dead Man, the Undertaker, you know, sitting up all of a sudden. Like, that's just him being Michael Myers, because it became part of our consciousness that you think somebody's dead or done for, but then boop, up he comes.
Well, Terminator, right? This is something, you know, we can kind of touch on this idea, but again, of the other subgenres, see, I'm not a big slasher fan. Like, I do like the original Nightmare on Elm Street, the original Halloween. I get to my point, because they're slasher films, but they're not what we would think of as a slasher film, because there's more to them thematically, cinematography, or cinematically. But my big thing is always, my favorite horror film is the original Godzilla, the original Japanese version of Godzilla.
My daughter loves all the kaiju stuff. I won't watch any of the stuff we're talking about with her ever, but we watch all the kaiju stuff. She loves it.
Oh, it's great. So I love things like Critters, but like Alien is that's clearly a horror film. Predator's a horror film. Terminator is a Michael Myers. It's just a sci-fi Myers slasher film. That's all it is, and it's all the same tropes. You have the Arnold Schwarzenegger's emotionless, almost non-human face. Right, the way he's presented, and then of course, once, you know, the skin starts dying and falling off, you have that added to it. Then you get to the endoskeleton scene, where it just keeps coming. He is a persistence predator, literally like Michael Myers. It's the same trope, just with that sci-fi switch to it, and where the supernatural element is, where Michael Myers has that supernatural element. It's the robot aspect of him that gives him that presence. So I agree. I think Michael Myers, for those reasons, creates this whole trope of the persistence hunter, you know, the the predator that's just always there, and it's going to get you eventually, and you just really can't stop it. I'm right there with you on that.
What did you guys? Now, this is a question for both of you, Jason and Dean. What did you guys think of the whole concept of Brightburn? Like, it's the Superman story, but it's like Superman as a horror villain.
Yeah, as a child.
How did you think of that,
Dean?
I won't lie to you. I'm totally aware of the movie. I haven't watched it though, but I know what it is.
See, here's the thing. I'm the same way. I never saw it. I'm very aware of it.
I never saw it either, by the way.
Yeah, so none of us saw the movie Transformers. I will say,
but I just thought it was an interesting concept, an interesting idea.
It is.
Yeah.
Here's my problem with it. Although, by the way, little caveat: it is in the same universe as the guy from The Office, Dwight. He had his own. I think it's literally called Super. That he did with. I forget her name, and then she became.
It's fantastic. That's a great movie.
Elliot Page, Ellen Page,
Elliot Page,
Elliot.
I love that movie.
Known as Ellen.
That was the same universe.
Yeah, so that's a thing at the end. We find out it is the same universe. So essentially, he's like the Batman of that universe, and this is their Superman. Of course, there's allusions to an Aquaman and a Wonder Woman figure at the end. But my thing is, the reason I didn't really care is because I'm already sort of out on the whole evil Superman trope, right? It's in my world of comics, it's so overdone that I'm like, I just don't care, right?
Well, Amazon have a hit series based on
The Boys. Well, again, I read the comics. Way worse. Again, it's like in many ways the video the show is much more toned down in ways, and actually I would suggest it's better, but I was out after season 2 anyway. But yeah, I was already kind of done with the evil Superman trope. But yeah, that's the thing is superheroes in any situation, they really would be a horror film, right? Like that's one of my favorites. One of my favorite actually fan films was a Spawn film, where he only appears for like 30 seconds, but it's a horror film. Spawn's a horror character, straight up.
That's why I like that Punisher Warzone movie, because if you think about it, it's kind of a slasher film. Yeah, because he messes. I mean, he kills the bad guys. Yeah, but he kills them in very disturbing ways. You know.
Well, in a way, he is a Michael Myers trope in that.
Yeah,
film.
He's kind of like a good Michael Myers.
Yep.
A Michael Myers for justice. Yeah. Hey, Dean, I'm curious about this answer. Okay. What, in your opinion, is the most overrated horror movie? In that everyone says, like, oh, it was so scary. I had nightmares for days. I couldn't believe it. It was, or one of those horror movies that everyone regarded, but you thought personally kind of sucked.
I think the Scream movies. I don't know if people say they were super scary, but they're just so stupid. Like they're not. I never found them entertaining. I thought the ghost face mask thing is just lame. Like it became such a Halloween, gimmick. It still is. Like who would even wear that? It's such a lame freaking. It's lame on the screen. It's lamer on you at the Halloween party, mate. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I wasn't impressed with them. I wasn't impressed with how kind of the whole self-referential clever stuff isn't clever. Just because you're self-referential doesn't make you clever. It just makes you annoying. So those movies just get, and I don't know if I saw the very last one, and I think aren't they doing another one now? But I was never impressed with it. I think, and whether everybody said it was scary or not, it certainly became a massive cultural phenomenon, made bank. It just kept going, spawned everything from, like I said, My Bloody Valentine, whatever it was, to the Jennifer Love Hewitt vehicle. There were so many of them. So in a way, I hate that movie with a passion because it destroyed a genre at the time I was very much in love with and wanted to enjoy, but I couldn't go every second movie at the cinema or more, probably almost every movie for a period was a Scream or a derivative of Scream. So yeah.
Well, it was around that, or not too long after that, then you start, I guess people started watching like the Asian stuff, because then not too long after that, The Ring came out.
Mm-hmm. And Blair Witch comes out at the end of the 90s as well, right? So it's kind of an antidote to that as well.
It's like every good Asian horror movie then has its American remake, though.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Yep, 100%. Real quick then, because I know we talked about sort of like your favorite, like your top 10 or your Mount Rushmore, right? What would be, I think, the one horror film that you would recommend that actually scared you, right? Because I think to a point, like my thing is, I don't really like slasher movies because they bore me, because they don't scare me at all. What is for your money? What are like maybe your top 4 truly scary, terrifying movies that really scared you, kind of a thing? They don't have to be the best, but the things that really got you go, okay, that scared me.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm literally racking I'm so desensitized is my problem now. I think the movies and I think that's why, as I said before, for a while was chasing the body horror thrill, because at least those movies, still had some kind of visceral, reaction from me. I remember there's a film I played at the festival once. There's some horror movies you can't recommend. Do you know what I mean? And maybe they're the ones I should talk about, because they're the ones which impacted. Well, I was clearly impacted by them, but I knew as much as I want to kind of recommend this movie, I can't recommend it to just anybody, because it's too much. There's a movie I screened at the festival and at a night of horror back in the day called Phanatomophose. Phanatomophose is how you pronounce it, I think. And it's basically about a woman who she's alive kind of, and she just starts rotting. That's what the movie's about. Her body starts rotting. But as she starts to rot, her sexual drive increases as well. So she wants to be with and it isn't like in the movie you see her with multiple people. In fact, the movie starts with close-up images of her having relations, and then she tries to get some men back, but she reeks. But the movie follows her as she rots, and it's stomach churning. Like, this woman rots on screen for an hour and a half, and at the end her body actually liquefies. She just collapses. It's super disturbing. Like, it's almost something from hell. It's so disturbing. Like, it's real. And I think movies like that, when you've been so desensitized to horror, when you see something like that, it sticks with you. Do you know what I mean? The imagery sticks with you for a long time. So they're the type of movies that that for a period, and I still run horror festivals and things, but the period and I was running horror festivals then, but the peak of my horror fandom they're the type of films I would like to see because they bothered me. August Underground movies are another example. Movies that present themselves as, you know what I mean, sickeningly, and I wouldn't recommend this stuff to anybody, but they're the movies that stuck with me when I saw them. And there's a number of films like that that present on screen particular nastiness which seems almost real, or is so psychically shocking that that you can't recommend it to a normal person. You know what I mean? Like, the person has to be stepped within horror properly.
They gotta be hardcore into horror.
Like extreme cinema. They can't just be somebody who likes Nightmare on Elm Street or something. You have to know they're an extreme cinema lover to even say, hey, this might be something up your alley. So they're the ones that have disturbed me. The type that I wouldn't point anybody at and say.
So things that are basically mimetic weapons is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
So things that actually cause PTSD.
So stuff like supernatural horror doesn't get you at all. Cosmic horror, those things don't get you.
I mean, I love that stuff because I'm such a fan of Lovecraft. So I mean, I love films which deal with, cosmic horror type tropes. Reanimator, if you'd asked me when I was in high school, that would have been on my Mount Rushmore. I love that movie so much. I also Dagon's a fantastic, Lovecraft movie. There's a bunch of really good which I think are really good Lovecraft adaptations, or at least a lot of fun to watch. But they don't bother me. They're entertaining. I saw somebody before mentioned Boondock Mojo said, "What do you guys think about Devil's Rejects?" Devil's Rejects, a movie which I think is quite powerful. Rob Zombie's first, like it's a sequel to House of a Thousand Corpses, and House of a Thousand Corpses was one of my brother's favorite films. I never was a massive fan of House of a Thousand Corpses. I thought it was a total failure for what it wanted to be. It wanted to present itself as a movie made in the 70s, like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it just felt like a movie made whenever it was late 90s, early 2000s. It didn't have any 70s aesthetic. Like it didn't look like a 70s movie at all. Devil's Rejects felt like a 70s grindhouse, artfully done grindhouse movie from the beginning, from the free bird at the beginning when they're in the police chase and everything else. And, you know, the images are freezing, to the aesthetic, to the way it was shot, to the color grade, to the costuming. It felt like some whacked out 70s movie. And that's a really strong movie, I think. Devil's Rejects, I think is a really powerful movie.
I'm noticing there's a bunch of people in here who are asking Dean about like what he thinks about these movies. For example, thoughts on Hellraiser.
I remember seeing the first Hellraiser when I was in high school at the cinema, because I was already a big fan of Clive Barker. I'd already read some of the books at Blood. I always liked Barker more than Stephen King. And I like I hadn't read a lot of King then because I really didn't like him. A lot of my friends in high school did. When I started A Night of Horror, funnily enough, I forced myself to read like the first 30 King novels or something, just because I felt like I couldn't have a discussion about Stephen King. So maybe I shouldn't be in the horror space. So I forced myself to read them. Some of them are good, but when I was in high school, I think Barker was more subversive. Like there was a sexuality in Barker. It isn't that King doesn't sometimes have that, even in sickening ways, but Barker was very subversive. And Hellraiser is clearly in that trope. It's essentially about BDSM demons, right? So I think as a teenager who's, discovering the weird realms of eroticism, I think I enjoyed that movie. I also think it's quite it's because it's a film made in Britain, so it had a very different feel as well. There's a strangeness to Hellraiser. There's a darkness to it. Yeah, I think Hellraiser's. Yeah, I like that movie.
It's body horror too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Built into it. Johnny?
A lot of people say The Exorcist is like the scariest movie. Thoughts on The Exorcist?
I think when you're Catholic, it is the scariest movie. And I'm not saying if you're Christian. I think that's it's interesting when I've ever spoken to not ever, that would be an exaggeration, but normally when I speak to people who say that's the really scary movie, for some reason it normally tends to be people who are in the Catholic faith. And I think that's because of a lot of the Catholic imagery and the priests and the rites and everything else. It's a great film, but I don't know if I don't think it really bothered me. I think what's the name of the demon? Zizu or whatever his name is?
Zizu, yeah.
I think when there's images of like the statue and the face and things appearing, I think that's creepy as all get out. When I was a kid, actually, speaking of The Exorcist, I really loved the Omen movies as well, like Omen and Damien and the Final Conflict. So I do like that type of religious horror also. That's something I didn't mention before. That's another subgenre I enjoy.
Good point. I hadn't even realized, I hadn't even thought of it as a subgenre. Subgenre. I can't talk today, but you're right on your point about how, like, I agree with you. I think most everyone who saw The Exorcist as like the scariest movie of all time, in my experience, tends to be Catholic as well, or has that Catholic roots. I think the other element to it is it's not, exorcism is not as a verboten subject in Catholicism as it is in a lot of other mainstream Christian denominations. So to a degree, if you're Catholic watching that film, you've probably heard a Catholic priest talk about this stuff. And it's not as, in a lot of ways, it's really not as over the top. Again, this is a paranormal channel. A lot of paranormal people watch. A lot of things that happen in that film are not as over the top as you would imagine in the annals of exorcism history and in the history of possession. So I agree with you. I hadn't really put two and two together on that until you said it, but you're right. I think that's a great, the people who have that sort of history would see that as one of the scariest. But for example, one of the scariest movies I think I've ever seen, and I highly recommend it, is The Fourth Kind. Don't know talking about that. That is, for my money, one of the scariest films ever made. And part of it was whereas I knew that the Blair Witch Project wasn't real, because of how they had hyped this up and the way they had hyped it. In fact, they got sued by the by the state of Alaska because everything they did was so over the top as far as trying to convince people this was a real event and that the stats they were putting out was real, that they actually got sued because they're like, guys, this is taking it too far. There's no way for a normal person to know that you faked all this stuff. So if you go into thinking that it's real, it is unbelievably terrifying, and there is, without giving anything away, an element that, particularly at that point in my life, with again, the ancient astronaut stuff that I'd already gone through and exorcism stuff that I'd engaged in, it's legitimately terrifying when you walk in the way they present it. I would suggest it's one of the scariest films of all time.
Wow. Speaking of scary and not scary found footage movies, and this is something I forgot before to a Donny question, was what do I think isn't scary and was hyped as scary? Paranormal Activity isn't scary at all. It's not scary for a second. And people would be going, did you see it? Like the something caught on fire or the door closed. I'm like, there's not a scary moment in this movie. So that, and I think even the advertising was like the scariest movie. Paranormal Activity, there's not a scary second in it. Like there isn't. But so that, I think that might be the most overhyped movie scary wise I've ever heard of. Still, I don't hate it still as much as the Scream movies, but it's certainly not scary at all. At all.
Overrated in terms of scariness.
Yep. Sorry, what was that?
I said overrated in terms of scariness.
Absolutely. Yes. There's no scariness in it yet. It was billed as the scariest movie ever, and it's not scary at all.
Wow.
I can see why you. I could definitely see why you. Again, I never even bothered with it, so, but I can see definitely why, because it does feel like the entire thing is basically just one jump scare after the other from everyone I've talked to about it.
I don't even think the jump scares.
I don't think it had any jump scares. Yeah,
I never jumped. I'm like, and I remember I watched it in a cinema with teenagers, and teenagers were reacting, but I think it's because they'd been hyped, and I'm like, I don't know who I was with, if I was a date or with a friend, but I was turning around going, what is like? There's nothing. There hasn't been, like, I get it when I'm not scared. I can still appreciate the artistry and go, okay, that was cleverly pulled off. But I'm like, there's nothing scary in this movie. I think it was like the Emperor having no clothes. I probably should have just stood up and said, "There's nothing scary in this movie," and everybody would have gone, "Oh, he's right. There isn't. This movie isn't scary at all." Instead of pretending they were getting shocked all the time.
Well, let the teeny boppers have their fun.
Okay, I think we're getting short on time because I know you got stuff to do, Dr. Dean. One last one I got to ask you to see if you've seen this one or have you heard it. This one's going to be obscure, so. Are you familiar with this?
I am. That's an Abel Ferrara movie, writes the director of The Driller Killer.
So, little fun fact about this. That guy that's getting drilled into cover, that was my high school English teacher.
Get out of town.
Seriously?
Yep. Mr. Schultz.
Get out of town.
He was my high school English teacher. Probably one of the most influential teachers in my life. Like, you all have that one teacher that really kind of made you think about stuff.
Yeah.
This guy getting drilled in the face. That was my high school English teacher.
That's fantastic.
He retired from acting. It was like his one claim to fame. And all the kids were like, oh, Mr. Schultz was in a horror movie. And we all looked it up and we all watched it. That's him. That was my high school English teacher.
Yeah, The Driller Killer is fun because it's gritty and weird, but it's not that great a movie. Not because I don't like Abel Ferrara, but it's just not that great a movie.
No, not at all. All right. But anyway, yeah, I think we'll leave it at here. Real quick. Dean, where can people find out more about your horror film festivals? Like, where can people find out more information?
Sure, the horror festival, you can follow it on Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else, but probably just go to anightofhorror.com and remember the A at the front of it, anightofhorror.com, or midwestweirdfest.com, which also has horror movies as well as paranormal content and other things that runs usually the first, or sometimes depending how that weekend plays out, the first or second weekend in March every year. Those festivals run in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And it's a heck of a wonderful time. We're at the Micon Downtown Cinema. It's this gorgeous little twinplex. We have both screens for the whole 4 days, and there's dive bars nearby, and lots of filmmakers come in, and there's a passionate local audience, and it's an amazing time. I mean, I obviously have to say that because it's a festival I run, but I really have a lot of fun there, and I know everybody else does as well.
I definitely hope to check it out one year.
You should come.
There's a bit of a haul going all the way out to where you said it was in Wisconsin.
Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Yeah, it's the closest big city to Eau Claire would be Minneapolis, St. Paul, which is about an hour and a half away across the Minnesota border.
Okay, we'll have to. But again, we're all going to be together at the Crossing Realms conference, and you'll have your first the 15-minute short version of The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers. Will be there.
Can't wait to see the whole thing, though.
Yeah.
Maybe the following year you guys will do when it's out.
There you go.
It's going to be fun. Hey, guys, so remember to check out Dr. Dean. He'll be at Crossing Realms. Jason, any last thoughts or words or any plugs before we end it?
No plugs. It's just great to be to hang with both of my exes today. And
we're the Old Wives Club.
The Old Wives Club.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things, because I'm not traditionally a fan of horror in general. This is just one of those things that we never get a chance to sort of talk about. And it's just great to have a conversation about the artistry of these things and the different genres. This, again, as an artist and writer, it's just great to have this kind of conversation with people who can actually hang in the conversation. So I'm just having fun. Go again. Y'all know you can find Dr. Dean on Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network. And again, Crossing Realms Conference. And if you live in an area where you can go see you can go hang out at the film festivals, go see it. Go see Dr. Dean. The festivals are amazing. He's amazing. You're going to have a good time. And buy merch, I guess. That would be the thing.
Yes, buy merch.
You've got merch. You've got like
more merch.
Yeah. Your festivals have merch, right?
I used to have a lot of merch in Sydney. I don't sell a lot of merch anymore, to be honest. I don't like holding merch for years, like, in a cupboard somewhere. I used to, though. I always use, and people often want more. And we've sold merch for special things, like, fundraisers and things, but we don't always push the merch as hard anymore. Maybe we should start pushing it again.
There you go. Okay. Well, you know what? Screw the merch. Just go to the film festival and say hi to Dean.
All right.
Please.
So, yeah, everyone say hi to Dean, say hi to me and Jason, and say hi to the three of us at the Crossing Realms Conference. It's coming up soon in September.
Yeah, it's
like
what,
a good time.
It's like 3 months away now.
Yeah, it's getting close. Wow. Shit. All right. So peace out, folks. Laters. Bye.
Dr. Dean is coming on the show tonight to talk movies that gave us screams, chills, and frights. He's a horror movie buff, didn't you know? Talking scary films with his friend Donny Cho. 'Cause he's the Dr. Dean, the Dean of horror. 'Cause he's the Dr. Dean, the Dean of horror. Talking movies of all that fear and wonder. Can tell by that accent, he's from down under. From the land of koalas and kangaroos. All the horror film knowledge that you can use. So sit back, buckle up, folks, and don't be tardy. Good I might throw another shrimp on that Barbie. 'Cause he's the Dr. Dean, the Dean of horror. 'Cause he's the Dr. Dean, the Dean of horror. Will Jason McLean join us? Who knows? Maybe last night a freaking dingo ate my baby. 'Cause he's the Doctor, the Dean of scary flicks. Will Jason crash the show? Yes, 'cause he's a dick. Dr. Dean talking all those movies we fear. 'Cause Foster's is Australian for beer. He's a Dr. Dean, talking all those movies we fear. 'Cause Foster's is Australian for beer.